Eagle 1, this is Captain Carter. I have the package secure. Requesting immediate abort of Protocol Omega.
The first missile lock warning came before anyone understood they were already being judged as a threat. Pacific Airlines Flight 881 was supposed to be quiet. A red eye out of Seattle. A sleepy run north toward Anchorage. The kind of flight where older couples folded their hands over paperback novels, business travelers loosened their ties, and tired parents whispered soft promises to children who had finally stopped crying. Then the sky outside seat 7. A split open. 2 F-22 Raptors dropped out of the cloud cover like black knives. No announcement. No explanation. No mercy in their shape. One slid beside the left wing. The other appeared on the right, close enough for passengers to see the sharp lines of its fuselage, the hard gleam of its canopy, the cold open mouth of its weapons bay. Someone screamed. A woman near the aisle clutched her husband's arm so hard her wedding ring cut into his skin. A retired school teacher in row 10 whispered the Lord's Prayer under her breath. A little boy pressed his face against his mother's coat and asked if the army was mad at them. No one answered him. The Boeing 737 kept moving through the dark, but it no longer felt like a machine carrying people. It felt like evidence. It felt like something being measured, weighed, and condemned. In seat 7A, Maya Carter sat perfectly still. She was a young black woman in an oversized gray Howard University hoodie, though she had not been a student in years. Her curls were pulled back loosely at the base of her neck. Wire-framed glasses rested on her nose. Her face was calm in the dim blue cabin light, but her right hand gripped the armrest with such force her knuckles pressed pale against her skin. To the people around her, she looked scared. To Richard Blake in seat 7B, she looked pathetic. Richard was 47, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and dressed like a man who believed money was proof of intelligence. His navy suit jacket was folded over his lap. His Rolex flashed every time he lifted his wrist to check the time, as if the aircraft owed him an apology for still being in the air. He had spent the first hour of the flight punishing everyone within earshot with his importance. I told them the Anchorage office should have sent the documents by private courier, he muttered into his phone before takeoff. I don't care what legal said. I'm not missing that board vote. The flight attendant, Laura Bennett, had asked him twice to lower his voice. Each time, he smiled without warmth. Sweetheart, I fly more in a month than you probably do in a year, he said. Just bring the whiskey. Laura's jaw tightened, but she walked away with the practiced restraint of a woman who had swallowed worse insults at 30,000 feet. Now, with fighter jets boxing them in, Richard's confidence had cracked. Sweat gathered at his temple. His laptop sat open on his tray table, forgotten. The whiskey he had demanded trembled in its plastic cup. He looked at Maya and saw her hand on the armrest. Well, he said, forcing a laugh that died before it reached his eyes. First time flying alone, kid? Maya did not look at him. Outside, the left Raptor held position with terrible precision. Its wingtip cut through moonlit mist. Not a rescue. Not comfort. A warning. Richard leaned closer, needing someone smaller than himself to feel powerful again. You've been white-knuckling that thing since takeoff, he said. Relax. The professionals up front have it handled. These guys know what they're doing. It's basically a big bus in the sky. Maya turned her head just enough to give him a soft, harmless smile. I just don't like turbulence, she said. Her voice was quiet, almost shy. Richard smirked, satisfied. He had placed her where he thought she belonged. Nervous girl, economy seat, hoodie, no authority, no threat to him. But Maya Carter was not watching the fighters like a frightened passenger. She was reading them. Their spacing, their altitude, their discipline. The left aircraft was signaling command. The right was guarding. Both had their weapons bays open, which meant this was not theater. This was escalation. Her eyes shifted to the wing. The 737 shuddered again. Not turbulence. A low, uneven vibration rolled through the floor beneath her shoes. The right engine had been off pitch for 11 minutes. The aircraft was carrying a nose attitude that did not match the sound of its speed. The ailerons had been correcting too often, too sharply, and there had been no word from the cockpit. Maya inhaled slowly. Old bruises along her ribs ached beneath the hoodie. They were leftovers from a classified mission no passenger on that plane would ever hear about. High G turns, black sky. Radar ghosts, a fight so brutal it had put Captain Maya Nightshade Carter on mandatory leave, not because she was weak, but because command feared what she had survived. She had flown machines that could climb like angels and kill like storms. Now she sat in economy, while a man with a Rolex explained airplanes to her. The aircraft dipped. Not much, just enough. Maya's eyes sharpened. Across the cabin, cups trembled. A loose tray clicked. A sleeping passenger woke with a gasp. Then the nose dropped. Hard. The whole plane fell forward as if the sky had vanished beneath it. Screams ripped through the cabin. Richard's whiskey shot upward and burst against the ceiling. A purse flew across the aisle. Seatbelts snapped tight against bodies. The overhead bins slammed and popped. Maya did not scream. She looked out the window. The left Raptor rocked its wings once. "Follow me." The Boeing did not follow. It drifted farther west, toward restricted airspace, toward a line no civilian plane was allowed to cross. Maya's hand released the armrest. Her fear had never been fear. It had been calculation. The drop lasted only seconds. But inside the cabin, it felt like the world had forgotten mercy. Pacific Airlines Flight 881 slammed level, with a sound that tore through metal and bone. The wings flexed hard. The ceiling panels rattled. A baby shrieked from the back of the cabin, and that tiny, helpless sound cut deeper than all the alarms. For one brutal moment, every passenger understood the same thing, without anyone saying it. They were not safe. Laura Bennett staggered in the aisle, one hand gripping the headrest of seat 5C. Her hair had slipped loose from its neat bun. Her face was pale, but her eyes were still working, still counting people, still searching for injuries. 20 years in the air had taught her that panic spread faster than fire. "Heads down," she called, her voice shaking but loud. "Stay seated. Keep your belts fastened." No one listened at first. Fear had turned the cabin into a living thing. People clawed at seat belts. A man tried to stand and was thrown back into his seat by another violent shudder. A woman shouted that she wanted to call her daughter. Another passenger yelled at the ceiling as if God owed him an answer. Richard Blake had both hands pressed to the armrests now. His expensive confidence was gone. His mouth hung slightly open. Drops of whiskey slid down from the overhead panel and landed on his sleeve. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. Maya did not answer him. Her eyes were fixed on the right wing. The flap-track fairings trembled. The aileron twitched again. Too much correction. Too late. Whoever was flying up front was chasing the airplane instead of leading it. That was how pilots died. Not all at once, not always in flames. Sometimes they died in pieces, one bad input after another, while their bodies lied to them and their instruments failed to make sense. The 737 rolled left, then snapped back right. The cabin groaned. Somewhere in the galley, metal carts broke loose and crashed against their locks. The sound was sharp, ugly, final. Richard turned toward Maya, his face grey. "You seem calm," he said, accusing her now, as if her silence were a crime. "Why are you so calm?" Maya's gaze moved from the wing to his eyes. "Because panic won't change the physics," she said. The answer landed harder than he expected. He blinked, offended and frightened at the same time. "What are you? Some kind of engineer?" Before Maya could respond, the cabin speakers cracked alive. A burst of static screamed through the aircraft. Then came a man's voice, thin and broken with terror. "Mayday! Mayday! Mayday!" Pacific 881, declaring emergency. "We have instrument failure. Attitude disagreement. Possible gyro failure. Captain incapacitated. We are experiencing spatial disorientation, unable to confirm heading, unable to maintain stable flight." The words moved through the cabin like a cold hand. Captain incapacitated. A woman began sobbing openly. An older man closed his eyes and made the sign of the cross. Laura froze for half a breath, and in that half breath, she looked less like a trained professional and more like someone's mother who had just realized she might not make it home. Then another voice cut through the same speakers. This one was not panicked, it was flat. Military. Controlled. Pacific 881, this is Raptor Lead on guard. You are off course and entering restricted airspace. Turn heading 090 immediately. Acknowledge. The cabin went so quiet that Maya could hear the air vents hiss above her head. The 737 did not turn. Instead, it dipped again. The right wing lowered. The Raptor outside broke away in a hard, clean movement that no commercial aircraft could match. The second fighter slid aft, smooth as a blade drawn from a sheath. Maya knew that position. Everyone else saw a jet. She saw a firing solution. Her pulse slowed. That was the strange gift war had given her. Not fearlessness. Something colder. Something more useful. When other people shattered, the world sharpened for Maya Carter. Details separated from chaos. Noise became information. Time stretched thin. She unbuckled her seatbelt. Richard grabbed her wrist. "Where do you think you're going?" he hissed. "Sit down before you get yourself killed." Maya looked at his hand on her skin. Not angrily, not loudly. Just long enough for him to understand he had made another mistake. He let go. Maya stood as the floor rolled beneath her. She caught the seat back, balanced with her knees, and moved into the aisle. Several passengers stared at her as if she had lost her mind. Laura hurried toward her. "Ma'am, I need you seated right now." Maya leaned close, so only Laura could hear the steel in her voice. "You need to open the cockpit door." Laura's face hardened. "That is not happening. It has to. No, Federal rules do not bend because a passenger is scared. I'm not scared. The plane dropped again. People screamed. Laura slammed against the seat beside her and gasped in pain. Maya held her steady with one hand. "Listen to me," Maya said. "The captain is down. The first officer is disoriented. The aircraft is drifting into restricted airspace with 2 armed Raptors in intercept formation. They are not here to comfort us. They are here to stop us." Laura stared at her. For the first time, she really looked. Not at the hoodie, not at the young face, not at the quiet black woman everyone had mistaken for harmless. She looked at Maya's eyes. They were not begging. They were commanding. Another burst of static came through. "Pacific 881. Turn heading 0. 9-0 now. This is your final warning." A low moan rose from the passengers. Richard stood halfway, shaking. "Somebody do something," he shouted, voice cracking. "There has to be someone in charge." Maya turned toward him. "There is," she said. Then she reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and switched on the flashlight. She moved to the window at seat 7A, raised the light, and began flashing a pattern into the night. Short, long, short, short. Not random. Not desperate. A code. Outside, in the cockpit of the lead Raptor, Major Caleb Hayes saw the flashes through the rain and cloud glare. His hand tightened on the stick. For 3 seconds, he did not speak. Then his blood ran cold, because only one pilot he knew used that rhythm. Nightshade. Major Caleb Falcon Hayes had seen her men panic at supersonic speed and still keep his voice calm. He had flown through desert lightning, over black water, beneath orders no civilian would ever read. But the flashing light from seat 7A made something inside him stop cold. Nightshade was on that plane. Not a rumor. Not a ghost from classified briefings. Not the woman command had quietly pulled from rotation after the mission over the northern Pacific. She was there, trapped inside a failing civilian aircraft that his targeting system had already begun to treat like a threat. Caleb's eyes snapped to the Boeing's cockpit windows. Dark, unsteady. Wrong. "Raptor 2, hold fire," he said. His wingman answered fast. "Lead, command has authorized engagement if they cross the boundary. I said, hold fire." The words came out hard enough to cut through the radio. Inside the 737, Maya lowered the phone light and watched the lead fighter shift its position. A fraction closer, a fraction lower. The move was small, but she understood it. He had seen her. Laura Bennett stood beside her, breathing through parted lips, eyes wide with a hope she did not dare trust. "What did you just do?" Laura whispered. Maya looked toward the cockpit door. "I bought us a minute." Richard Blake had heard enough to be frightened and not enough to understand. His face twisted in disbelief. "You bought us a minute? With a phone flashlight?" Maya stepped past him. He blocked the aisle with one hand on the seat back, his old arrogance trying to crawl back into his voice because fear had nowhere else to hide. "Wait. Who are you?" Maya did not slow down. "Someone you should have listened to." The PA cracked again, louder this time. Static broke apart, then the military voice returned, no longer addressing the cockpit like strangers. Now it carried recognition, urgency, command. "Pacific 881, this is Raptor Lead. You have a United States Air Force captain in seat 7A. Call sign Nightshade. Open the cockpit door and get her in the left seat. You have less than 60 seconds before this aircraft crosses restricted airspace. The cabin changed. It did not get quieter. It became heavier. Every breath, every soar, every whispered prayer seemed to sink toward the floor. A woman in row 6 stared at Maya with both hands over her mouth. The retired schoolteacher who had been praying opened her eyes. A man who had been shouting moments earlier fell silent as if shame had taken his voice. Richard stood frozen in the aisle. His eyes traveled from Maya's hoodie to her face, then to the phone in her hand, then back to her eyes. He was searching for the nervous girl he had mocked. She was gone. Maybe she had never existed. Laura swallowed hard. "Captain?" she asked. Maya turned to her. "Yes." That one word carried no vanity, no drama, no apology. Laura's face tightened with a different kind of fear now. Not disbelief, responsibility. She had been trained to protect that cockpit door from everyone, from threats, from panic, from desperate passengers who thought courage was the same as competence. But this was different. The rules had not prepared her for a black woman in a hoodie being identified by an armed F-22 as the one person who might keep hundreds alive. From the cockpit, the first officer's voice spilled through the PA again, broken and distant, as if he were speaking from underwater. "I can't trust the horizon. I can't trust the screens. Captain Mercer is unresponsive. We're losing altitude again. I need help. Somebody, please." The last word was not procedure. It was a human being falling apart. Laura moved. She pushed through the small cluster of terrified passengers near the front galley and reached the reinforced cockpit door. Her hand shook as she lifted the interphone. "Flight deck, this is Laura. I have Captain Carter here. Air Force." Raptor Lead confirmed her. A burst of noise answered, then a strained male voice. "I can't open it. I can't take my hands off the controls." Maya stepped close to the panel. "Ethan Walsh," she said sharply. The cockpit went still for half a beat. "You know my name?" The first officer gasped. "I heard it in your mayday." "Listen to me. Look at the standby attitude indicator, not the primary display, not your inner ear. Your body is lying to you." There was breathing over the line. Fast, ragged. "I can't tell what's level." "Yes, you can," Maya said. "You're still alive, which means the airplane is still talking. Stop fighting the ghost picture. Unlock the door." Another drop hit. The cabin tilted. People screamed again. Somewhere in the back, a man cried out that he smelled fuel, though it was only spilled liquor and fear. Caleb's voice thundered through the guard frequency. "Pacific 881, boundary in 45 seconds. Laura stared at the door keypad. Maya looked straight ahead. "Ethan," she said, slower now, "you are not alone. But if you keep trying to prove you can save it by yourself, everyone behind this door dies with you. Open it." For a moment, there was only the roar of engines and the thin metallic whine of a jet being mishandled in bad air. Then a click, small, mechanical, beautiful. The cockpit door unlocked. Laura pulled it open. Warm instrument light spilled into the dark cabin, and with it came the smell of sweat, burnt wiring, and blood. Maya stepped inside. Captain Daniel Mercer lay slumped in the left seat, his headset crooked, a red line running from his temple down his cheek. First Officer Ethan Walsh gripped the yoke with both hands. His pupils were wide. His face shone with terror. He was staring at instruments that no longer agreed with each other. A trained pilot trapped inside a body that had betrayed him. The nose dropped again. The ocean filled the windshield. Maya moved with terrifying calm. "Move," she said. Ethan looked at her, lost. I said, "Move." This time, he obeyed. Maya Carter took the left seat while the aircraft tried to throw her out of it. The yoke kicked in her hands. Heavy. Wrong. The nose was down, the right wing low. The air speed climbing toward a number no one wanted to see on a damaged passenger jet. Rain streaked across the windshield in silver lines, and beyond it, through broken cloud, the Pacific Ocean rose like a black wall. First Officer Ethan Walsh stumbled backward, breathing like he had run a mile. "I don't understand what it's doing," he said. "The screens don't match." The horizon kept rolling. "I thought we were climbing." "You weren't," Maya said. She did not say it cruelly. There was no room for cruelty. Only truth. She planted her feet, scanned the standby instruments, and ignored the screaming mess of failed displays around her. The glass panels were arguing. The airplane was not. The airplane spoke through vibration, pressure, pitch, sound, drag. It told the truth in pain. "Laura," Maya called without looking back. "Secure the cabin. Brace positions on my command. Keep everyone seated." Laura Bennett stood at the cockpit threshold, stunned by what she was seeing. The young woman in the hoodie had vanished. In her place was someone made of steel and training, someone whose hands moved with the terrifying calm of a surgeon cutting into a beating heart. Laura nodded once and pulled the door closed behind her. In the cabin, the passengers saw her emerge, pale and shaken. Richard Blake grabbed her sleeve. "What's happening? Is that girl flying the plane?" Laura looked at him, and for the first time all night the softness was gone from her face. "That captain is flying the plane," she said. "Sit down and fasten your seatbelt." Richard opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Up front, Maya pulled gently first. Nothing. The yoke resisted like it was buried in concrete. The elevator was jammed or fighting hydraulic failure. She adjusted trim. The wheel moved sluggishly. Too slow. She eased back harder, careful not to tear the wounded aircraft apart. "Come on," she whispered. "Talk to me." The 737 groaned. Ethan stared at the altimeter. "We're passing 1,200 feet. I see it." "We're too low." "I see it. 800. Maya's jaw locked. She brought the throttles back just enough to keep the speed from shredding them, then fed power asymmetrically to correct the roll. The aircraft shuddered, nose still down, ocean filling the windshield. For a flicker of a second, she was not in a Boeing. She was back in the Raptor, canopy iced with stars, warning lights flashing red across her gloves, G-force crushing her lungs while a missile tone screamed in her headset. Men in quiet rooms had later called that mission survivable. Maya remembered it differently. She remembered choosing not to die. She chose again. "Hold on," she said. She hauled back. The yoke fought her. Her shoulders burned. The bruises along her ribs flared bright and mean. The aircraft trembled so violently that a coffee cup spun off the console and shattered against the floor. Ethan braced himself against the center pedestal, eyes wide with horror. "Maya," Caleb's voice broke through the radio, tight with restraint. "Nightshade, you are very low." "No kidding, Falcon," she said through clenched teeth. The nose came up 1 degree, then another. The ocean was still there, huge and black and hungry. 500 feet, Ethan shouted. Maya did not blink. She brought the left throttle forward, trimmed against the dead weight, and used rudder with a precision that made the airframe answer 1 inch at a time. The stall warning chirped, then died. Overspeed warning flickered, then faded. Every system seemed to be threatening a different death. 300 feet. The windshield filled with spray. Ethan made a broken sound behind her. Maya's voice dropped to ice. "Do not make that sound in my cockpit." He swallowed it. The airplane leveled so low, the wave tops flashed silver beneath them. For 1 breath, the whole 737 skimmed above the Pacific, like a wounded bird refusing the sea. Then it climbed. Not much, not gracefully, but enough. Ethan stared at the altimeter as if it had become scripture. 700 feet, 800. We're level at 800. Maya held the aircraft there, hands firm, arms shaking from the strain. Her face was damp with sweat. Her breathing stayed even. She keyed the radio. Raptor lead, Nightshade has the jet. Level at 800 feet. Manual control. Multiple system failures. Captain incapacitated. First officer alive, but not fit to command. For half a second, the radio stayed silent. Then Caleb answered, and beneath the military discipline was something almost human. "Copy that, Nightshade. I have you." Sliding into formation. Outside the left window, the F-22 eased into view, close and steady, a Guardian with missiles still armed and judgment withheld. In the cabin, the passengers felt the aircraft stop falling. No one cheered. Not yet. They were too shaken, too aware of how close the ocean had come. A woman kissed the top of her grandson's head and trembled into his hair. The retired teacher wiped tears from her cheeks. Richard sat rigid, staring toward the cockpit door, as if the entire shape of the world had changed while he was busy looking down on someone. Up front, Maya scanned the instruments again. Hydraulic pressure was dropping. The right engine was unstable. Elevator response was partial at best. They were alive, but the airplane was dying slowly around them. Caleb's voice returned. "Nightshade, nearest major airport is not an option at your altitude and condition. I'm checking alternates." Maya looked at the storm ahead, then at the wounded controls in her hands. "Make it close," she said. The aircraft bucked again. She held it. Not because she was unafraid, because everyone behind her was. Caleb Hayes searched the coast like a man looking for a miracle on a map. In the lead Raptor, rain streaked across his canopy and vanished into darkness. His radar painted the crippled 737 as a heavy, unstable target, crawling over black water at barely 800 feet. He had seen enemy aircraft less dangerous than this, not because of intent, because of momentum, because a wounded passenger jet with failing controls could kill everyone aboard and half a town below without ever meaning to. "Command, Raptor lead," Caleb said. "Pacific 881 is under manual control by Air Force Captain Maya Carter, call sign Nightshade. Aircraft is severely damaged. Request immediate diversion options along the coast." The reply came through clipped and tense. "Raptor led. Seattle Center confirms anchorage not possible. Major airport options exceed current range and control condition. Civilian emergency coordination is underway." Caleb's jaw tightened. Underway is not a runway. There was a pause. Then another controller broke in. Older voice, local accent, urgent but steady. Raptor lead, I've got Harbour Point Municipal Field, coastal strip, approximately 6,000 feet, lights unreliable due storm damage, fire crew limited, runway surface wet, approach from the southwest over water. Caleb glanced at the Boeing rocking beside him. 6,000 feet. For a healthy 737, it was short. For a damaged one, heavy, unstable, and being flown by muscle and prayer, it was almost an insult. He keyed the radio. Nightshade, I have one option. Harbour Point Municipal. 6,000 feet. Wet runway. Poor lighting. Emergency crews minimal. In the Boeing cockpit, Maya absorbed the information without flinching. Ethan Walsh, strapped into the jump seat now, turned pale. 6,000? He said. We can't stop on 6,000. Not like this. Maya kept her eyes forward. We don't need perfect. We need land. The aircraft dipped again, and she corrected with rudder and asymmetric thrust. Her left hand moved across the throttles in tiny, exact motions. Her right hand held the yoke like it was trying to escape. Behind the cockpit door, Laura Bennett moved through the cabin with a calm she no longer felt. Brace instructions, she called. Listen to my voice. Shoes on. Seatbelts low and tight. Remove sharp objects from your pockets. Heads down when I say. A man in row 12 began arguing. I need to call my wife. I need to tell her where the insurance papers are. Laura knelt beside him, gripping the seat back. Sir, your wife needs you alive more than she needs paperwork. The man stared at her. His mouth trembled. Then he nodded and put the phone down. 2 rows ahead, the little boy who had asked if the army was mad at them was crying silently. His mother's hands shook so badly she could not tighten his seatbelt. Laura reached over and did it for her. What's your name, sweetheart? Laura asked. Ben. Ben, I need you to be strong for your mom. Can you do that? The boy nodded, tears shining on his cheeks. Richard Blake watched all of this from seat 7B. Something had broken open in him, and it was not courage, not yet. It was humiliation. He remembered the way he had spoken to Laura, the way he had dismissed Maya, the way he had measured people by clothes, age, race, posture, accent, service role. He had walked through the world like every room came with a head table reserved for men like him. Now, a black woman in a hoodie was fighting a dying airplane through a storm, and a flight attendant he had called sweetheart was holding the cabin together with nothing but her voice. Richard looked down at his hands. They were shaking. In the cockpit, Caleb's Raptor slid ahead of the Boeing, just off the left side, positioning himself where Maya could use him as a visual reference. Nightshade, field is 12 miles northeast. I can lead you in. Weather is ugly, ceiling low, crosswind from the west. You'll need a shallow approach. Maya looked at the standby altimeter, then the engine readings. Hydraulics. Ethan leaned forward, fighting to be useful. System A. Pressure is nearly gone. System B fluctuating. Manual gear extension should work. Flaps are questionable. Then we assume little to no flaps, Maya said. Ethan swallowed. Landing speed will be high. Yes. Stopping distance will be bad. Yes. We could overrun. Maya finally looked at him. We could also drown out here in the dark. Pick your fear and work anyway. Ethan lowered his eyes. Shame crossed his face, but so did focus. He reached for the checklist with trembling fingers. Maya softened her voice by 1 degree. "Read me what I ask for. Nothing more. You're still in this cockpit." That saved him more than comfort would have. It gave him a job. It gave him a place to put the terror. Caleb's voice returned. "Nightshade, you'll see my burners when we line up. I'll give you a light path." Maya almost smiled. "You planning to be my runway lights, Falcon? If that's what it takes." Outside, the lead Raptor surged forward into the storm. For a few seconds, it disappeared in rain and darkness. Then twin blue-orange flames cut open the night. The afterburners burned ahead of them like 2 furious stars. In the cabin, passengers saw the light through the windows and turned their faces toward it, not understanding what it meant, only knowing it was moving in front of them like a guide. Laura picked up the interphone. "Captain Carter, cabin is prepared." Maya's voice came back, low and steady. "Thank you, Laura. Brace on my command." Laura closed her eyes for half a second. She had never heard such calm so close to disaster. The runway appeared as a faint broken line beyond the rain. Too short, too dark, too real. Maya adjusted the throttles. The Boeing began its final descent. Richard gripped his seatbelt and whispered, not to God exactly, and not to anyone near him, "I'm sorry." No one heard him over the engines, but for the first time that night, he meant it. The runway came and went in flashes, a thin grey scar beneath the storm. Maya Carter held the crippled Boeing on final approach, with both hands locked around the yoke and every muscle in her body burning. The aircraft wanted to roll. It wanted to sink. It wanted to quit. She could feel it in the sluggish response, in the uneven pull of the engines, in the tremor under her boots that did not belong to turbulence. Ahead of her, Caleb's F-22 cut through the rain like a blade dipped in fire. Twin afterburners glowed blue and orange, bright enough to mark the invisible path toward Harbor Point Municipal Field. There were no comforting rows of city lights, no wide airport welcome, no clean runway shining beneath control tower glass, just storm, water, darkness. A short strip of wet pavement waiting beside the trees. "Nightshade," Caleb said, his voice low and tight. "You are lined up. Slight right drift. Crosswind pushing you left. I feel it." Ethan Walsh leaned forward from the jump seat, checklist shaking in his hands. "Gear?" Maya glanced at the indicator. 2 green, then a flicker, then 3. "Gear down." "Flaps?" She tried the lever once more. The aircraft groaned, but gave her almost nothing. Minimal response. "We land fast." Ethan closed his eyes for half a second. He knew what that meant. Too much speed, too little runway, too little braking, too much weight. In the cabin, Laura Bennett stood in the aisle with her back braced against a seat, one hand gripping the interphone. Her face looked covered from stone, but inside she was counting every person she had touched, every belt she had checked, every frightened eye that had looked to her for certainty she did not have. The airplane lurched. A woman screamed. Laura raised her voice. "Brace positions, heads down, stay down until I tell you." The command rolled through the cabin, sharp and practiced. People folded over themselves. Older bodies moved slowly, painfully. A grandfather helped his wife lower her head between her knees and kissed her hand before tucking his own head down. The little boy named Ben clutched his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Is the pilot lady going to save us?" His mother had no answer. Richard Blake heard the question. It struck him harder than the turbulence. The pilot lady. Not the scared girl. Not the kid in the hoodie. Not the passenger he had mocked to feed his own importance. The pilot. He bent forward into brace position, but shame would not let him hide from himself. In the dark pocket between his knees, he saw Maya's face when he had called her kid. Calm. Patient. As if she had spent her whole life watching people underestimate her and had learned that correction was best delivered by survival. Up front, the runway threshold rose in the windshield. Too high. Maya eased the nose down. Too fast. She brought the throttles back, then fed one forward just enough to fight the drift. The jet yawed. The rudder answered late, like an old man waking from a nightmare. The left wing dipped. She caught it. "Sink rate," Ethan warned. "I know. 400 feet. I know." The runway lights flickered weakly through the rain. Some dead. Some drowning in water. Caleb's afterburners pulled away and climbed, clearing her path. For one moment, his raptor filled the windshield like a guardian stepping aside at the gates of judgment. Then Maya was alone with the runway. 300. The ground rushed closer. The 737 shook violently. Wind slapped the fuselage. Rain hammered the glass. The right engine coughed, surged, then steadied. Maya felt the entire aircraft sag beneath her hands. "Not yet," she whispered. Ethan stared at the speed. "We're hot. Better hot than stalled." 200. Maya's breathing slowed. The storm roared. Her bruised ribs screamed. Her mind narrowed to three things: nose, wings, runway. "Brace," Laura shouted in the cabin. "Brace, brace, brace." The wheels hit. Not softly. The Boeing slammed onto the runway with a violence that punched the air from every chest on board. Tires shrieked. The left main gear bounced, came down again, and held. The right side shuddered so hard, a panel tore loose in the cabin and clattered across the aisle. Maya shoved the nose down and brought in reverse thrust. The engines roared. Water blasted up around them. The runway became a silver river. The brakes bit, slipped, bit again. A tire blew with a sound like a cannon shot. Then another. The aircraft veered right. Ethan yelled, "We're losing centerline." Maya was already on it. She used what little rudder she had, balanced the thrust, fought the skid. The end of the runway rushed toward them, black trees standing beyond it like a wall. They were not going to stop. Maya knew it before Ethan did, before Caleb did, before anyone in the cabin lifted their head and hoped. She made the only choice left. "Hold on," she said. She kicked the jet into a controlled sideways slide, letting the blown tires and wet pavement drag them off the runway toward the muddy infield. Metal screamed. Sparks tore past the windows. The cabin filled with cries, prayers, names of children, names of spouses, names of God. The Boeing carved into the mud. The nose swung. The tail whipped. For one awful second, it felt like the aircraft would roll. Maya held the yoke against the dying machine as if strength alone could argue with physics. Then the mud grabbed them. The aircraft lurched, tore a deep trench through the soaked field, and stopped. Hard. Silence crashed down. No engine roar. No screaming metal. Only rain. Breath. A child sobbing. Maya stared through the windshield at the trees. They were close enough to touch. But they were alive. Maya Carter did not move for 3 seconds. Not because she was frozen. Because survival had a checklist and emotion was never first. Her hands stayed on the yoke. Her eyes moved across the broken cockpit, reading the silence after impact. Engines winding down, warning lights bleeding red across the panels, rain hammering the windshield, mud packed high around the nose, no flames visible ahead, no immediate roll, no water, no trees through the cockpit glass. Alive. Only then did she breathe. "Ethan," she said. The first officer sat twisted against the jump seat harness, his face white, his hands shaking so hard he could barely unclip himself. "I'm here," he said. "I'm here. Fuel cut off. Battery as needed. Fire handles only if indicated. Confirm no engine fire." He stared for half a beat, still trapped somewhere between falling and stopping. Maya turned her head just enough for him to see her eyes. "Ethan." That single word pulled him back. "Yes." "Right. Fuel cut off." He leaned forward, moving clumsily, but moving. No engine fire indication. Right engine spooling down, left engine spooling down. Battery on, emergency lights active. Behind them, Captain Daniel Mercer groaned. Maya looked over. Blood still marked the side of his face, but his chest rose and fell. "Captain Mercer is breathing," Ethan said, voice cracking. "Keep him still." The cockpit door burst open. Laura Bennett appeared in the frame, soaked in cabin light and fear. One sleeve was torn. A thin cut marked her cheek. But she was standing. That mattered. "Captain Carter?" "Evacuate," Maya said. "Forward doors if safe. Overwing exits if clear. Keep them moving away from the aircraft. Upwind if you can tell." "No bags?" Laura nodded. She did not ask if Maya was sure. Not anymore. She turned and became thunder. "Evacuate. Leave everything. Move. Move now." The cabin woke into chaos. Seat belts snapped open. People cried out as stiff knees and old backs protested. A man reached for the overhead bin, and Laura slapped his hand away with a force that startled them both. "No bags," she barked. "Your life is leaving this plane, not your luggage." The man dropped his arm. Emergency slides bloomed into the storm like pale tongues. Rain blew sideways through the open doors. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of mud, jet fuel, and wet grass. Passengers stumbled forward, faces shocked and hollow. The retired schoolteacher clutched a stranger's hand. The mother lifted Ben and shoved him gently toward the slide, whispering, "Go, baby, go." Ben looked back toward the cockpit. "Where's the pilot lady?" "She's coming," Laura said, though she did not know if it was true. Richard Blake stood in the aisle, dazed. His suit was wrinkled. His silver hair hung damp across his forehead. For once, no one was looking at him for instructions. No one needed his title. No one cared about his board vote. An elderly woman beside him struggled with her belt. Her fingers were swollen with arthritis, clumsy from terror. Richard looked at her, then at the exit, then back at her. Something human finally outran his pride. "Let me help," he said softly. She flinched at first, expecting impatience. Instead, he knelt, freed the buckle, and steadied her as she rose. "Take my arm," he said. I don't want to slow anybody down." "You won't." His voice broke on the words. He guided her toward the slide, one careful step at a time, while younger passengers pushed past. Laura saw him and said nothing. Her silence was not forgiveness. Not yet. But it was recognition that fear had not made him worse. It had finally made him smaller. Outside, passengers hit the muddy ground and scattered into the rain. Some fell to their knees. Some turned back and stared at the broken aircraft, unable to believe that Metal Coffin had become a shelter instead of a grave. Caleb's F-22 roared overhead once, low and slow, checking the field. Then it climbed into the storm, circling like a sentinel. In the cockpit, Maya unbuckled and stood. Pain flashed through her ribs so sharply her vision narrowed. She gripped the seat back until it passed. Ethan noticed. "You're hurt. Later. We need to go. After we check the cabin." He stared at her, almost angry with relief. "Maya, you landed it. Let someone else be last." She looked at him. "That's not how command works." She moved into the cabin. Rows of empty seats leaned crooked in the emergency glow. Oxygen masks hung uselessly like pale vines. Bags, phones, shoes, and spilled drinks littered the aisle. The smell of fear remained, even after the people had gone. Maya checked row by row. "Anyone here?" She called, "Sound off!" A faint cry came from the rear. She moved faster. Near the back, a teenage girl was trapped half under a dislodged service cart, her ankle pinned, tears running silently down her face. "My grandma," the girl whispered. "She went out. I told her I was behind her." Maya crouched beside her. "What's your name?" "Kayla." "Kayla, look at me. You are not being left behind." The girl locked onto Maya's face like it was a lighthouse. Maya braced one foot, ignored the fire in her ribs, and lifted the cart enough for Kayla to pull free. The girl cried out, but moved. Maya wrapped an arm around her and guided her toward the rear exit. Outside, Laura saw them and ran back through the rain. "I've got at her." Maya handed Kayla over. "Go." Laura hesitated. "What about you?" Maya looked once more down the empty cabin. For a second, all she saw was seat 7A. The grey hoodie crumpled on the floor. The life everyone had mistaken for small. The woman they had not seen until armed jets said her name. Then she stepped into the rain. The storm struck her face cold and hard. All around her, passengers stood alvem in the mud, staring. No one cheered. They were crying too much for that. But one by one, they understood. The quiet woman from seat 7A had not survived with them. She had carried them out of the sky. Rain poured over Maya Carter, like the sky itself had broken open. She stood in the mud beside the wounded Boeing, one hand pressed against her ribs, the other hanging loose at her side. Emergency slides sagged in the storm. Passengers huddled together in the wet grass, wrapped in thin airline blankets and each other's arms. Red lights pulsed across their faces from the first rescue trucks, grinding toward the field. The aircraft behind them looked impossible. Its nose sat buried in mud. Its landing gear was twisted. One engine hung low and smoking, ticking as it cooled. Long scars cut across the belly where the ground had tried to tear it open. A few yards farther ahead, the tree line waited like a silent verdict they had somehow escaped. Laura Bennett moved among the passengers, counting aloud. 114. 115. Keep moving together. Stay clear of the aircraft. Her voice was hoarse now, but it still carried. She had become the line between panic and order, and the passengers obeyed her because they had seen what obedience had saved. Ben clung to his mother's coat, his small face turned toward Maya. "Mum," he whispered, "is she a superhero?" His mother looked at Maya standing alone in the rain, soaked hoodie gone, dark tactical shirt clinging to her shoulders, eyes scanning the aircraft even after everyone else had escaped. "No, baby," she said softly. "She's real." That was harder for the boy to understand. Real heroes were supposed to look different. Louder, taller, wrapped in music and flags, not exhausted, not muddy, not a black woman everyone had ignored until the sky itself called her by name. Richard Blake heard the boy and felt the words cut through him. He stood nearby with the elderly woman he had helped from the plane. Her hand still rested on his arm, though she no longer needed support. Maybe she sensed that he did. His suit was ruined. His Rolex was smeared with mud. His face carried the stunned emptiness of a man who had survived the crash and then met himself in the wreckage. He watched Maya move toward the front landing gear. "Captain Carter," Laura called, "please get away from the aircraft." Maya did not stop. "Fuel smell is stronger near the right side," she said. "Move everyone farther upwind." Laura turned immediately. "You heard her. Everyone back. Keep moving. No stopping." Ethan Walsh stumbled down from the forward slide with 2 firefighters supporting Captain Mercer between them. Mercer was barely conscious, wrapped in a yellow rescue blanket, his face gray beneath the blood. His eyes found Maya. He tried to speak. Maya stepped closer. "Don't move, Captain." Mercer's voice came out rough. "My airplane?" Maya looked back at the broken 737. She held long enough. His eyes filled, not from pain alone. Pilots loved machines in a way most people never understood. They knew the difference between metal and a vessel that had carried souls. Mercer closed his eyes. "Passengers?" "All out," Maya said. "Alive." The word seemed to pass through everyone within earshot. Alive. Not safe, not whole, not untouched, but alive. Then the sound came, a deep thudding from the clouds. One Black Hawk appeared first, then another. Their rotors beating the rain flat as they descended beyond the runway. Floodlights swept over the field, washing the crash site in white. Mud flashed. Rain glittered. The passengers shielded their eyes. From the first helicopter stepped Colonel James Whitaker. He was 54, tall, broad, and unsmiling, with the posture of a man who had delivered bad news to too many families and remembered every name. His uniform was dark with rain before he had taken 10 steps. 2 military police officers followed him, along with a medic and a young aide carrying a field tablet. The local firefighters slowed when they saw him. Even the storm seemed to make room. Whitaker walked straight to Maya. For a moment, neither spoke. He looked at her face. The fatigue, the pain she was hiding. The mud on her boots, the blood on one sleeve that might not have been hers. Then his eyes shifted past her to the aircraft, the torn ground, the impossible stopping distance, the trees waiting just beyond the nose. When he spoke, his voice was low. "Captain Maya Carter." Maya straightened despite the pain. "Colonel, administrative leave is rescinded effective immediately." A flicker of something moved across her face. Not pride. Not relief. Something more complicated. a soldier being pulled back into the world that had nearly consumed her. Whitaker raised his hand and saluted her. Sharp, formal, public. That was masterful flying. The field went still. Passengers watched in stunned silence as the colonel held the salute. Some did not understand the rank. Some did not understand the history. But they understood respect when they saw it. They understood that the woman they had mistaken for a frightened college kid had just been honored by a man who looked like he did not give praise lightly. Maya returned the salute. Her hand was steady. Richard took one step forward, then stopped. He had spent a lifetime walking into rooms as if apology were something other people owed him. Now he could barely cross 10 feet of mud. The elderly woman touched his sleeve. "Go on," she said. Richard swallowed and walked toward Maya. Laura saw him and stiffened. So did Ethan. Even Colonel Whitaker turned slightly, measuring him. Richard stopped a few feet away. His mouth opened, but the first words failed. Rain ran down his face. For once he did not wipe it away. "I was wrong," he said. Maya looked at him. The whole field seemed to listen. Richard Blake stood in front of Maya Carter, with the rain beating the pride out of him. For most of his life, he had believed apologies were tools, not truths. A sentence spoken to calm investors. A line written by attorneys. A public gesture performed when cameras were close and consequences were closer. But standing in that muddy field, beneath military floodlights, with the broken Boeing behind him, and 115 souls breathing because of the woman he had mocked, he understood something brutal. Some words arrived too late to fix what they revealed. Maya said nothing. She did not rescue him from the silence. That was not her job. She had already done the rescuing that mattered. Richard swallowed. His voice came out rough. "I treated you like you were nobody," he said. "I talked down to you. I talked down to her too." He glanced at Laura, who stood several feet away with her arms folded against the cold. "I thought I knew exactly who mattered on that plane." Laura's expression did not soften, but she listened. Richard turned back to Maya. "I was wrong before the emergency ever happened." That sentence reached farther than the apology itself. It moved through the survivors with quiet force. A few lowered their eyes. Some knew exactly what he meant. They had looked at Maya and seen a young black woman in a college hoodie. They had seen youth, economy class, stillness, ordinary clothes. They had not seen command. They had not imagined power could sit quietly by a window and never announce itself. Colonel Whitaker watched Maya, not Richard. He knew her well enough to know praise made her uncomfortable, but injustice did not. Injustice she understood. It had followed her into classrooms, briefings, hangars, promotion boards, and cockpits. It had changed its clothes over the years, but never its face. Maya finally spoke. "You weren't the first man to underestimate me, Mr. Blake." Richard winced. She held his gaze. "You were just the loudest one today." The words landed clean. No shouting, no cruelty, just judgment. Richard nodded slowly, accepting the blow because he deserved it. "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry." The elderly woman he had helped from the plane stepped forward, wrapped in a blanket. Her name was Margaret Ellis, 78 years old, retired librarian, grandmother of 6. She had been watching Maya with the calm intensity of someone who had lived long enough to recognize history when it stood in front of her. "She saved you too," Margaret said to Richard. Richard looked at her. "She saved all of us." Margaret turned to Maya, her wet silver hair pasted to her forehead. "My husband was a mechanic in Korea," she said. "He used to tell me the best pilots never bragged. He said they listened to the machine like it was speaking scripture." For the first time, Maya's face changed. Not much, just a flicker. "He was right," she said. Margaret reached out and took Maya's hand. Her fingers were cold and thin, but her grip was steady. "Then he would have liked you." Maya looked down at their joined hands. For one brief second, the soldier disappeared and the woman remained. Tired, hurt, human, carrying praise she had not asked for and grief she had not explained. Behind them, medics moved through the crowd. Rescue lights swept across faces. Children were wrapped in blankets. Older passengers were led toward waiting ambulances. Firefighters sprayed foam near the right engine as a precaution. The storm kept falling, but it no longer felt like punishment. It felt like aftermath. Caleb Hayes arrived in the second Black Hawk. He crossed the field fast, helmet tucked under one arm, flight suit dark with rain. When he reached Maya, he stopped just short of embracing her. Military discipline held him back, but his eyes betrayed him. "Nightshade," he said. "Falcon." He looked past her at the torn trench in the mud, the blown tires, the trees just beyond the nose. "You always did have a flair for subtle landings." Maya let out the smallest breath of a laugh. It was not joy exactly, but it was alive. "You always did talk too much on approach." Caleb smiled, then the smile faded. "I almost had orders to fire." The air between them changed. Maya knew. Of course she knew. But hearing it from him turned the truth into weight. "How close?" Caleb looked toward the aircraft. "Seconds." Richard's face drained again. Laura closed her eyes. Several passengers nearby heard him and went still. Seconds. Not minutes, not almost. Seconds. Maya looked at the people gathered in the rain. Ben in his mother's arms. Margaret wrapped in a blanket. Laura standing upright, though her legs had to be shaking. Ethan sitting on the bumper of a rescue truck with his head in his hands. Captain Mercer being loaded carefully onto a stretcher. Seconds had separated them from becoming a headline no family could survive reading. Colonel Whitaker stepped closer. "The public report will be careful," he said. "Mechanical failure, navigation deviation, military intercept, emergency landing." Maya understood the meaning beneath the words. And Nightshade? Whitaker's expression hardened with regret. Classified history stays classified. Caleb looked angry. Laura looked confused. Richard looked ashamed, though for once the shame was not about himself. Maya nodded. That was the bargain. Serve in the shadows. Survive in silence. Let other people decide how much of your courage the world was allowed to know. But Margaret still held her hand. Ben still stared at her like truth had a face. And Richard Blake, ruined suit and all, spoke quietly. "Maybe the report can't say everything," he said. "But we can." Maya looked at him. He straightened, not with arrogance this time, but responsibility. "I'm on the board of a media company," he said. "For once, maybe I can use the room I'm in for something decent." Laura tilted her head. "You planning to tell the truth now?" Richard accepted the edge in her voice. "Yes," he said, "starting with the part where I was a fool." Maya watched him for a long moment. Then she picked up the soaked grey hoodie from a firefighter who had retrieved it from seat 7A. She held it in both hands, mud on the sleeves, rain dripping from the fabric. The disguise, the assumption, the thing everyone thought defined her. She looked at Richard and gave him a faint, tired smile. It was basically just a big bus in the sky, right? For a second, nobody moved. Then Richard lowered his head. "No, Captain," he said. "It was never just that." And around them, under the floodlights and the rain, the survivors finally began to clap. Not loudly at first. One pair of shaking hands. Then another. Then dozens. Applause rose across the field, broken by sobs, carried by gratitude, humble and raw. Maya did not know what to do with it, so she stood still and let it fall over her. For once, she was seen. The applause did not make Maya Carter taller. It did not erase the bruises beneath her ribs. It did not clean the mud from her boots or take the tremor out of her hands now that the crisis had passed and her body finally understood what her mind had refused to allow. But it reached her, one broken clap at a time. The survivors stood scattered across the wet field, wrapped in blankets, soaked to the skin, faces pale beneath the rotating lights of rescue trucks and helicopters. Some clapped with both hands. Some could only tap their fingers against a blanket. Some cried too hard to make any sound at all. Maya stood before them with the grey hoodie in her arms, the same hoodie that had made her invisible, the same hoodie that had let Richard Blake call her kid, the same hoodie that had hidden a warrior from a cabin full of people who thought authority had one shape, one voice, one kind of face. Colonel Whitaker lowered his salute, but his eyes stayed on her. He had seen medals placed on chests that had done less. He had seen men praised for courage they borrowed from others. But this woman had saved an airliner with no uniform, no crew, no preparation, no promise of recognition, and almost no time. That was the kind of courage institutions liked to use, but rarely knew how to honor. Laura Bennett stepped closer. Rain had washed the blood from her cheek into a faint pink line. Her voice was nearly gone. "Captain Carter." Maya turned. Laura tried to speak, but her composure cracked. She pressed a hand over her mouth and looked away for a second. Then she faced Maya again. "I almost kept that door closed." Maya understood the weight in those words. Laura had not been careless. She had followed the rules that existed because the world had become dangerous. But rules were made for ordinary emergencies. This night had not been ordinary. "You protected your passengers," Maya said. Laura shook her head. "You saved them." Maya looked toward the crowd. Ben was wrapped in his mother's arms. Margaret Ellis sat on the back step of an ambulance with a medic checking her blood pressure. Ethan Walsh sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the ground like a man replaying every second and trying to forgive himself for being human. Captain Mercer was being lifted into a medical helicopter, one hand raised weakly as he passed her. Maya gave him a small nod. Then she looked back at Laura. "We all got them out." Laura's eyes filled again, because that was the kind of sentence spoken by people who had the right to take all the credit and chose not to. Richard Blake stood a few feet away, hearing every word. He had built a career on taking credit, on entering rooms after others had done the work, on speaking first, loudest, longest. Now he watched Maya give honor away as naturally as breathing, and the shame in him changed shape. It became instruction. He turned to Laura. "I owe you an apology too," he said. Laura looked at him with tired eyes. "Yes," she said. "You do." He nodded. "I spoke to you like your job made you smaller than me." "It didn't. It made you responsible for people like me when we didn't deserve your patience." Laura studied him. Then she gave the smallest nod. "Do better when no one is crashing," she said. "I will." Maya heard that and almost smiled. Above them, the storm began to weaken. The rain softened from punishment into mist. Dawn had not yet arrived, but the black sky was loosening at the edge, turning from ink to deep blue over the trees. Caleb Hayes stood beside his helicopter, watching Maya with an expression he would never allow in a briefing room. Pride, relief, fear arriving late. "You know they'll try to bury the best parts," he said. Maya folded the wet hoodie over one arm. "Let them try." It was not defiance for the cameras. There were no cameras yet. It was something quieter, stronger. A woman who had been unseen too many times to confuse silence with defeat. Margaret lifted her voice from the ambulance. "Captain Carter." Maya walked over. The old woman reached up and squeezed her hand again. "My husband used to say, the sky tells the truth about people." Maya knelt slightly so Margaret would not have to strain. "What did it say tonight?" Margaret smiled through tears. "That some people rise exactly when the rest of us fall." Maya looked down for a moment. The words entered a place in her that medals never reached. Behind her, Richard looked at the broken plane, the field of survivors, the military lights, the woman kneeling in the mud beside an old passenger who simply wanted to thank her. He thought about every meeting where he had mistaken volume for wisdom, every airport lounge where he had measured human worth by seat class, every woman, every worker, every quiet person he had dismissed before they had a chance to prove he was wrong. The lesson was not gentle. It was not supposed to be. Some people only learn when the truth tears through the clouds with missiles armed. By sunrise, Pacific Airlines Flight 881 would be on every screen in America. The official story would speak of mechanical failure, emergency response, and a remarkable landing at Harbor Point Municipal Field. It would use careful language. Safe language. Language that made terror sound manageable. But the passengers would remember more. They would remember the F-22s boxing them in under a moonless sky. They would remember a flight attendant holding fear back with her voice. They would remember the moment a quiet black woman in seat 7. They stood up and the world shifted around her. They would remember that power does not always announce itself with a title, a suit, or a loud command. Sometimes it sits by the window. Sometimes it wears a hoodie. Sometimes it lets fools talk until the moment comes to save them anyway. Maya Carter looked once more at the aircraft, then at the people walking away from it alive. Her face remained calm, but her eyes carried the whole night. The judgment, the danger, the insult, the reveal, the impossible landing, the applause she had never asked for. Then she turned toward the waiting helicopter, shoulders squared, moving slowly through the mud as the first pale line of morning touched the coast. And somewhere behind her, Ben's small voice rose through the fading rain. "Mom, I want to be brave like her." His mother held him close. "So do I, baby. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe for more powerful stories, and comment true hero below.